We hear it from IT teams all the time. We have until 2026, so we're fine. Today, we're going to bust that myth. On paper, something like July 2026 for SharePoint Server 2016 and 2019 sounds like a long time away. So what's the rush? Well, at extended support, when that ends, that means you no longer get security patches and you no longer have the ability to get support from Microsoft when something goes wrong. And these environments, especially ones that have reached end of extended support and end of support windows in general, are under greater risk because they're bigger targets for people who have a goal of getting your data and getting into your environments. But that's not the only thing to think about. When you look at the end of extended support or the support window, you can actually find this information online. You can do it by basically going to the Microsoft Lifecycle site, and under there, you can search for product. In our example, we're looking for SharePoint, so we'll type in SharePoint, and when we do that, we'll see a number of different results for SharePoint editions. We can see at a glance that the SharePoint version that we're talking about today, 2016 and 2019, they reach the end of support quite soon, in July of 2026. And this date of end of extended support is a little different than mainstream. So just so we're clear, mainstream support means there's no more updates, no improvements to the product, and you can't ask for improvements from Microsoft. But extended end dates, or the end of support, is really about when Microsoft chooses to no longer provide security updates and support for that product. This is because at that date, all customers are supposed to be completely moved off of those products. It's because Microsoft can only support products for so long because the costs included in making sure they maintain the right security posture, the right compliance, and the right support that we as customers need. So that's what end of extended support means in a nutshell. So why is it so important for the dates that we're working through right now? Well, it turns out migrations can take a long time. They need to have time for each of their phases, like pre-migration analysis and assessment, the pre-migration planning phase. Then you have the actual planning phase where you map out everything and you work through that. Then you have the testing of the migrations. Then you have the actual migration execution. Then you have post-migration and cleanup and other activities that all are occurring over this migration window. And it's not surprising that it can take 12 to 18 months. Migrations also, when they're rushed, they create all sorts of issues, higher error rates, increased downtime, significant dissatisfaction for users. It creates pressure on IT, often leading to burnout and IT teams that are extremely stressed, and a lot of cost overrun. And then, of course, compliance penalties stack up. If your environment is still on that past extended support window and your migration's not complete, that's a pretty big risk. In fact, even if you're close to that window, there's a risk there as well. And so we need to make sure that we have the plan in place, we know the timelines, and we know how they work. And don't underestimate little things in that process, like the decommissioning window. It takes time in large organizations to decommission those environments, those servers. So you need to make sure that those are also done before that window and after the migration. So your deadline is actually the deadline minus the decommissioning window, probably some buffer time as well, and then minus the entire migration project scope. Migrating isn't just about moving the files. You have to think about the other layers to this as well. As an example, when you take the content, you have to think about the content itself. Is it redundant? Is it outdated? Is it trivial? Then you need to think about around that content, the metadata. When was it modified? When was it created? What is the information people have enriched? They spent all this energy enriching, custom or tailored metadata. That needs to come across with it. And we need that fidelity not just to extend to things like metadata, but permissions. We need security and those things and the versions and all that information to come across in a reliable way. And while that's coming across, we need to think about how that transitions, from SharePoint to Teams to groups. There are a lot of additional considerations in Microsoft 365, not least of which would be something like external users, where in the on-prem environment in 2016 and 2019, it functions a very different way than it does in SharePoint Online and Microsoft 365. Once you understand the content and its context, you then need to understand the integration. Think of the processes, the workflows, the forms that interact with that. From InfoPath forms to SharePoint workflows, those need to be transitioned to Power Automate or modern experiences like the new modern list experiences or library experiences, or it might modernize into Copilot agents and other Copilot experiences. But you do need to think about what surrounds that content and integrates with it, not just the context and the content. And when you start to think about it this way, you realize that even though a migration feels like you're just moving the content from here to there, you're replatforming it, the reality is the hardest parts are often when you have to retest and rethink the business processes and the way in which that content will work in that new environment. Fortunately, when it comes to migrations, you have resources, tools, partners, and more that you can use to beat the clock and finish faster. So what do these look like? A few quick examples. One of the first resources I would encourage you to use is Microsoft's guidance and materials themselves. There's a wonderful and rich community out there that's built on this and gives you additional insight, but there are useful resources like understanding what is classic to modern, what are some of the considerations when you're migrating from SharePoint Server to SharePoint Online in OneDrive. These are things you can get some guidance from Microsoft and the community from. One particular community resource I'm going to highlight is this one, which is an ebook that goes into SharePoint 2016 and 2019 and gives you checklists and actionable tools you can use to do the migration planning. This includes things like key terms and ideas. So if you look at this checklist, we understand that, of course, the process includes mapping, but what is that auditing process and how do you do it effectively? Well, earlier within this particular asset, you can see examples here where it says remove, migrate, and rebuild, which is part of our raw analysis. So you look for that redundant, outdated, trivial content, you audit and map it using a series of different techniques, and then once you've done that, you basically determine what you're going to do with that content. And there's a lot of other guidance in here, including things like how to deal with modernization, classic to modern, all sorts of other things. But beyond resources like this, I want to highlight the importance of tools. You see, besides planning your migration and preparing for it, you actually do have to migrate. And what's interesting is that many of the tools that help with the migration can also help with the planning. So as a quick example here, if we take something like SMAT, which is a Microsoft first-party tool, there are tools available from Microsoft that you can use to analyze your SharePoint environment. In this case, a 2016 environment can be analyzed using SMAT and help you understand what some of the risks are for the migration. One of the challenges with these first-party tools is they don't always do everything you need. So keep in mind that while this does provide insights, it doesn't work in SharePoint 2019 at all. And in 2016, if you have never used these types of tools before, they can be a bit overwhelming because each of these Excel documents can have quite a few false positives. A quick example of this is the customized pages detail. The idea here is look for the pages that have been customized or have a risk of customization so that we can validate them after we migrate. So we can say, oh, like this JavaScript broke or this change happened. And because we can see which ones those are, that saves us time. Unfortunately, because there's .x and .doc documents in there, you'll have to filter those out. Once you filter those out, you also then need to often validate if they do have customizations or if they've just been unghosted, a term from back in the day from SharePoint. So that's the first thing, is that these reports are really powerful, but they do require a bit of understanding on how to use them well. And I highly encourage you to explore the communities. There's many resources that explain what to look at in these reports and how to use them, or a partner can help you with that. Now, if this first-party option isn't exactly what you're looking for, there are other options as well. Again, many of the migration tools also do assessments. So in the example of ShareGate, we can use a third-party tool to both help with the assessment and dive a bit deeper when we need to. Here's a quick example of an assessment where we're looking at the environment. We can see that there are errors, things that are block us or high risk, and then there are things that are warnings, things that maybe are worth considering or understanding. And we can see that they're broken up in different categories. Oh, well, these are unsupported sites, so you need to think about what you're going to do when you transition that over. Or, hey, there's some custom features here. Maybe those need to be evaluated to determine if they're going to come across, and there's something that could be supported in SharePoint Online or your Microsoft 365 environment, or there's something you need to tackle in a different way. Checked out files, same idea. So there's a number of different reports. Now, these reports aren't limited to just those. As another example here, you can actually go in and create your own reports. So you could take some of those existing ones like unused sites and maybe expand it in interesting ways. Let's say I wanted to not just see things like unused sites, but I wanted to know what documents haven't been modified within a certain time period. Maybe I want to do that for a particular subset of sites for a batch of my migration, or I want to look at sizing or versions and the number of versions or other types of factors. These are all things that you can do deeper reporting with third-party tools. So ShareGate can help with that, but it's also useful for the actual migration itself. Once you've done that hard work of planning and doing it, you want to start testing your migrations. To do that, you can copy the structure and content, which helps with both structuring and moving stuff around, not just in the migration, but in the post-migration as well. A great example of this, either during the migration or after, is you might want to take a number of sub-sites and transition them towards hub sites. In this way, what we can do is we can promote them into a better, more modern structure. And this can be done with nice reporting and tools that accelerate that work. The more we can speed up not just the test migrations, not just the migration, but the assessments, and of course, the post-migration restructuring we need to do, the better off we're going to be. Because there's a lot of that in all these projects. You don't just move the content, you have to think about the business processes, you have to think of how to merge it, you have to think of those types of changes. So this is absolutely one of those use case scenarios where having more helps you, whether it's more resources, whether it's support of great partners out there that can help you, whether it's engaging with the community with your questions and needs, or whether it's using the right tool that saves you time and energy. If you start now, you control the pace. If you wait until the end of support, like July of 2026 for SharePoint 2019 and 2016, then you're going to face increased risks. You're going to face a rushed migration. You're going to face greater downtime, disruption, and security exposure. So our recommendation is to get started now. Use a tool like ShareGate to do a quick read-only assessment, understand what those risks are that you need to address, and how complex your migration is. This will give you a sense of a realistic timeline for your migration, which will show you that you don't have until the end of support to get your migration done. This brings us to the wonderful moment in this video where we get to say officially that the myth that you have until end of support is officially busted. explosions. Why is that important? Because it means all of us can help others understand that we need to get moving, whether it's SharePoint migrations or it's other workloads, well ahead of the end of support. If you're looking for links, there are links in the description for the ebook that we referenced that has guidance around SharePoint 2016 and 2019 migrations, including checklists and other resources like that. There's also a link to ShareGate, so you can go and try it, maybe start your first migrations or run that read-only assessment to help understand your own sense of timeline. Now, there are still many Microsoft 365 myths out there, and we could use your help in uncovering them. In the comments below, add a myth for Microsoft 365 that you've heard that you'd like to see busted or didn't quite sound right. In addition to this, hit that bell and subscribe so that you don't miss the next episode of Microsoft 365 Mythbusters. And remember to stay curious, keep busting those myths, and don't forget, Microsoft 365, we've got this.